Hey everybody, we're back again to review season 2 of Star Wars Rebels. I didn't mention it in the previous video, but about like certain people we get to see from the original series and prequels. Of course, we get to see R2D2, C3PO in one episode. We get to see Bail Organa, and then the informant working for Hera turns out to be Ahsoka Tano, and it's like she's definitely growing into her own woman, and just even though she's not calling herself a Jedi, but let's be honest, she's a fucking Jedi, and she's more wiser, but she's still like obviously as we get into season 2, still haunted by the events of the Clone Wars. A lot of people are. It's not even just her. It's like anybody who's been part of the Clone Wars in some fashion are still broken and obviously still holding like some PTSD from the events. 1 second here. Just had to adjust my seat. Obviously still holding like, a fair amount of PTSD during the events of that war. So, yeah, I mean, now we get like 2 more Inquisitors. I don't know their names specifically. There's always like an 8th brother or 7th sister, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. It's hard to keep track. They don't stay around long enough for us to remember. I think by and large, people remember the Grand Inquisitor because I think he left more of an impact than any of the other Inquisitors. And maybe, I mean, unless you were really, really into the thick of the franchise and the lore of Star Wars, like not just a casual fan, but like in the nooks and crannies of the franchise to recall their names, by memory. Unless you're one of those, it's like, good on you. But it's like, I don't know. It's too many people to just remember by heart that deep cut that don't last long. Because if they would have stuck around for at least, because Grand Inquisitor seems like the head Inquisitor. It seems like, I don't know his name specifically, but he just called the Grand Inquisitor. And it's just like a simple title. And then you'll know exactly who you're talking about. If he's called, I'm pretty sure he has a name, but if he's called like Khabib, and he only lasted season 1, I don't think anybody would probably, because nobody called him by his real name that often to warrant remembering, warrant for memory. So the other 2, this woman and this dead body Inquisitor, as thought woman Inquisitor and dad body Inquisitor. That's all I remember about them. They were intimidating, especially the female who uses those little droid bot things as like little drones that, that seems, like her little pets, like, pet birds or something like that. And they just fly off and just attack. Thought that was pretty dope. But, yeah. Other than that, you also get the return of Captain Rex. And of course, if you watch my review for The Bad Batch, or if you've seen The Bad Batch personally yourself, that other clone that The Bad Batch rescued from that prison that I refer to as Deadpool clone, he returns to. I don't recall this other partially blind clone, because just these 3 clones that show up in like the 3rd episode of season 2. And I don't, like I was surprised, like, because rewatching, because this came out first before Bad Batch, obviously, so it's nice to see like, oh, there's some synergy. Like other people probably know who that guy was from Bad Batch, but after rewatching all this stuff, like, oh, there's callbacks that I did not realize there were callbacks. So that's pretty dope. That episode was, I think I liked that episode. I think season 2 is definitely a little bit better than season 1. I'm still not a fan of the art, or at least like the graphic design of the characters, the overall world from Rebels. I'm not a fan of that. It's like the look is decent, but man, it's just like, it's not impressive. I really generally don't care for it. But like, I like Kanan's, because Kanan goes through a bit of an arc, a mini arc in this, because meeting these clones, he obviously has some strong prejudice against them just right off the bat, because his last memory of these clones were not only killing his master, but wiping out most of his Jedi culture and people. And so looking at their faces just brings back all those horrible memories. And of course, he didn't know or care to know that a few of these, they were brainwashed, but a few of them managed to escape that. He initially just didn't care until, like, Rex, showed him that, like, hey, like, we're not those clones. We're not those troopers. And of course, you see that, you're going to be seeing that here and there, how like the war affected everybody, especially with Ahsoka. You get like a moment where, like, all the crew along with Ahsoka is trying to escape because they're fighting with Vader. Vader is like returned to this, getting into this fight in the standing of the Grand Inquisitor, and they're doing a space fight, and Vader, being Anakin Skywalker, very skilled pilot in his own right, uses these maneuvers to, like, he's by himself and he's just wrecking. This one little pilot is wrecking or handing the rebels their ass, and Hera can't compete with this. As good as she is as a pilot, she cannot compete with this. And Ahsoka, Kanan, and Ezra is trying to use the Force to, like, figure out who this guy is. And he's obviously skilled with the Force, but who is this guy? Until Ahsoka and Vader locked, like, minds, and she realized who that is. And that dark side just overwhelms her, and she just, like, freaks. But that comes to a head when they, all three ghosts, because they realize that, okay, because these Grand Inquisitors keep popping up in certain places after they keep tracking primarily Ezra and Kanan. And so they want to figure out how to defeat these Inquisitors. So they return to the Jedi Temple that was shown in the last season, and each of these three have to go through each of their own tests. Ahsoka has to come to grips with not being there in time to help with the events of Order 66, and she regrets not being there for her master during his downfall, because she felt like she could have done something, but she obviously regrets that. Is like, she depicts that as like her greatest failure, because she wasn't there for Anakin. And that's like Anakin's biggest, like, fall to the dark side, is that he felt like everybody abandoned him. At least one of his, like, things that was preyed upon by the Emperor, losing the ones closest to him. And Kanan's test is like, worrying about his ways of being a teacher, worrying about, like, losing Ezra to the dark side, and he's getting tested by these, like, Jedi guards. And one of them turns out to be the former Grand Inquisitor, who I guess came to the light side, or like, something. I don't know, and it was never explained like how he found his way back to the light side. But anyway, he tested Kanan, and he knighted Kanan himself, making him officially a Jedi Knight, since this was his test that he should have gone through before the events of Order 66. But now he's officially gone through it, so he's officially a Jedi Knight, which is cool, and I think a lot of people love this part. Then, Erza going through his test, he not physically, but he actually visually able to see Yoda this time, proving that his power is growing. And, Ezra's pleading to Yoda's like, like, what you're teaching me is like the, these ways of the Force, but that's, and like, trying to do it through, fight the war through peaceful, this and that and the other, but that's not going to help us fight these guys. These guys will wipe us out. They do not care. I need to be able to find a way to fight back. I need assistance. Help me, Yoda. And of course, Yoda is probably like the best part of Yoda so far that I've seen from these shows. Is that Yoda? Kudos to the, like the art department, like, showing that sorrowful, sunken face on Yoda, knowing that like he's just like a old hermit full of regrets, and like how the dark side blinded him for them for so long and led to this terrible event. But he tells Ezra to seek out what's this thing called some with an M, Malachor, which turns out to be like a Sith temple, like the Jedi temple. There was a Sith temple long ago. We'll get to that eventually, but it was a nice little shot at the end while they were escaping the Jedi temple that was crumbling. Ahsoka turns around to see Yoda, is like forcing, using the Force to see her, and they don't say nothing. He just waves, and and then she smiles back, and you just know these two people who haven't seen each other for such a long time, has been through a lot, and it's just like you can see on each other's faces that they were just happy to know they made it through and they're fine. And at least some solace to know that these two were comrades and like master and student, people who like they see she looked up to him, and this one of his prior students, knowing they were both okay. And I thought that's probably one of my favorite scenes so far in season 2, probably as a whole in Rebels. Just that look, and it's just like, man, that really got me, just to see that these two, years gone by, and it's like, can you imagine that feeling? It's like two friends that have been through a lot, haven't seen each other for like 10 years, and just you see each other across the way years later, and you just give that nod kind of thing. It's like, it gets you. We'll get towards the end. I think that the last 2 episodes are probably like, my favorites as well. But you get like, one of those episodes where two people who are enemies are trapped on a place, tied together or trapped together, or trying to find their way out, kind of crap in that kind of episode. You get that with Zeb and this guy who I call Sideburns guy, who works as one of the admirals or commanders for the Imperial Empire. Crap, what's his name? Callus. Uh, uh, oh, what is it? Dang it. Yeah, it was Callus. Sideburns guy. That's what I'm calling Sideburns guy because I probably won't remember Callus. But they're trapped on a planet and like he's you know explaining to Zeb because he said he took one of Zeb's people's like one of his people's honor guards staff, and he's like, "Oh, I took this off a dead when you're dead people," but then he kind of like walked it back in this episode, talking about like, I fought one of them in honorable combat, and he gave me this as a sign of respect, but he didn't bother to say all that. He just, made it seem like he was taunting him. Seemed that was like a weird kind of like walk back. But it's like one of those kind of episodes. Half the time they're done well. Other times I don't care for these kind of episodes. It's kind of like one of those episodes after like episode 100 of a sitcom. You go over like, oh, like just one of those memory, like, oh, you flash back to certain events. Like, remember that time, like that girl came over and like that her ex come knocking at your door, blah blah blah. Like, remember that, and you see like flashbacks to that scene that you saw in the previous episode, kind of thing. It's like one of those kind of gimmicky episodes. It seems like kind of overplayed. But I mean, it was alright, but it just seems like was the episode that kind of, because I remember Cal's eventually going good, but this is like the shit that first shift into that, because Zeb's people came to help him, but he refused to allow to be like, at least as he puts it, like a rebel prisoner. So he waited for the Empire to come pick him up. And eventually they did, but they, just looked at him coldly, kind of thing, more so than usual, because they all act cold towards each other, or callous towards each other. Speaking of which, I didn't mention this in the previous season, in my previous video about season 1, but when you see like generic officers, either from Empire or Rebels, whether side, when it is a generic person, it's kind of like the red shirts in Star Trek, where it's like they don't need to be remembered, they're gonna be dead, in a few seconds anyway. But like all these officers, just to save money on drawing certain people, I know they're supposed to be grunts, so you don't need to put in that much effort, but it's too much work to give them just a generic look. We all gotta just have like hats on where you can not see their eyes, or helmets on, and not see their eyes, and it's like they're down here, and it's like, sure, sir, like whatever you say. And like, it's an old coal, sir, kind of thing. And it's like, I thought that was like, was that? And like, I don't know what's the logic behind that. It's like, yeah, they're gonna die in a few seconds. You don't really need to remember them. They don't need distinct looks. But kind of have to give them eyeballs or like just give him like a freaking face. I mean, like all animated shows have like just characters in the background. You don't really need to worry about them. They don't need distinct looks, but just give them looks. Uh, what else? Uh, yeah, Vader, has a very big presence in here, and I love it. And James Earl Jones is still voicing Vader, in this point in time. It's like just, giving the riot act to a lot of people, and just he doesn't even need to do much because when he's on the Imperial base, like he just had that commanding presence, and it's just like that's Anakin underneath, and it's like everything about him is just perverse now, and he's just like he's like, okay, I'm just this guy now. I have nobody, despite him sensing Ahsoka still around. Doesn't matter to him at this point. It's like she left in his eyes. She left him, and a lot of people just like she's no different to Obi-Wan in his eyes at this point. And so the only person he truly in his mind loved was his wife and kids, who he thinks is completely dead at this point by his hands. So all he has is his hate and his anger, and it's just like he's on a tear, man. Especially when he's like taking on Ezra and Kanan, and they are no match for this guy. They don't even know who this guy is initially. They just know he's a Sith, and it's like he is just. And they try to knock some ass who was just like standing by. It wasn't pilot or anything like that, because they was on this like Imperial base. They force push these things on top of Vader, and like he just like forces it up above his head and just like woof, tosses it away from him, and he just kept on walking. Like, man, and that really highlights the events of Rogue One with this guy, because it's like he is like a monster of a guy. It's like he just goes full on. Dealing with him, you need to be on a whole different level. You need to be on a level like, because Ahsoka probably almost matches him, but you need someone like Obi-Wan or Yoda or even Luke eventually to because gotta train to a certain point and have some experience on you. But Luke didn't have that much experience, but he trained a hell of a lot, to a certain point, especially in between like the events of New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. But you gotta be on a different level. It's like he's on level 100. You gotta be at least 99 to have like a sliver of a chance to like defeat Vader. I think like if I can put like a level cap on Ahsoka at this point in time, she would probably be a level like 97, 98. Just barely making it with a through the skin of her teeth, because you couldn't defeat him, because you'll see that towards the end, because she barely makes it out herself, just like almost like a stalemate at this point. But she could easily have lost her life at this point in time. But yeah, and what else? Shoot, it was like 22 episodes in this. It was like a lot to cover. It's like a lot to remember. Like I said, it's always, like I said in the previous video, there's always side quests that don't mean shit half the time. Oh, you get to meet like Princess Leia in this, and like of course, this is before like New Hope, when like she's being like interrogated by the Empire. But this is when like the her people of like Alderaan is working with the Empire, but secretly helping the rebels. Now, she's like, going through the subterfuge just to make sure like the rebels get 3 Imperial cruisers, but they got to make sure they don't appear that they're helping the rebels. Otherwise, it'll be like a whole thing, and they will have no match against the Empire. So they gotta have these rebels, kidnap Princess Leia, and the and then the Imperials rescue her. But all the while, all her cruisers get, or not her cruisers, but the Empire's cruisers get stolen in the ensuing fight, but while maintaining her cover. It was a really dope episode. And it's like you get to see like the gumption of Padme through Leia in this. Like, she's not afraid to be in the thick of it. And it's like, man, they do make her look like Carrie Fisher a lot in this. And it's probably like the one time I actually like the graphics in this show. Because they probably pull double duty in making sure Princess Leia looked like freaking Carrie Fisher. And I'm like, God, I love that. And that's like, only part of the like I said, the art that I thought was stunning. And of course there's Vader and Ahsoka and Yoda. I think, like, they come to these like old guard characters. I think they put more effort into it because they're so integral. But like Azure Blizzard, Kanan, Zeb, dealer's choice on how you feel about them. But like, other than that, the art kind of sucked to me. Yeah, and there's like side missions. I can't get rid of these side missions. I don't care. It's like, I really wish they stuck with the Jedi stuff and stick with like, the main crux of, dealing with the Empire. I know some of these side quests is part of dealing with the Empire, but it's like, like Zev getting trapped with Callus. I mean, well, that kind of leads into something larger, but it's like, it's like Chopper trying to find his leg kind of crap. And it's like, do I need this episode? Do anybody need this episode? It's like, there's certain droids that I care for too. Even like in Clone Wars, there was an episode with C-3PO and R2-D2 that I did not care for either. And I love those characters, but I did not care about their little side bases or them getting lost and, finding a way out of the situation. There was an episode with Ahsoka's lightsaber getting pickpocketed in Clone Wars. I didn't care for that either, even though I love the character. It's just, stick to the main thing. I don't care about the side filler crap. Honestly, it's like, like I said, there's 2 things you gotta stick to that by and large I only care about. Because you get a thing with like a side little filler thing. I want to say call it filler, but I'm pretty sure she'll make a return. But Sabine's sister, who turns out to be a bounty hunter, and that's the whole thing. And it's like, she's cool. She's voiced by Gina Torres, and that's how you pronounce her name, Gina Torres. Yeah, Torres. She's a lovely woman. It's like, the first time I've seen her in anything was in the early 2000s show, late 90s, early 2000s show called Angel, who in itself was a spinoff from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She played one of like the main villain of the second last season of Angel. That's the first, because apparently she was in Firefly too, but I never watched Firefly. But that was the first time I ever seen Gina Torres in anything. She's a lovely woman. No shade on her, but that I don't know if she had like an overbite or something like that. It's always kind of like wigs me out a bit. I don't know. one second here. Uh, close the window. Um, but yeah, I just, like most of this show is just like filler, and it's like they could have just trimmed this down to the meat and potatoes of it. Because uh, I mean, like I don't mind like the extra, like I said, like the Princess Leia thing. That's part of the main story. You know, you know, we already figured out what happened to Ezra's parents. I don't need any more of him trying to assess what happened. They could have just reduced that into his own. Like in the Clone Wars, he could have done the same thing, reduce these things into their own like 2-3 episode arc. They could have like a 2 or 3 episode arc dealing with Ezra and like the search for his parents and finding out what happened. Boom, bang, done. And move on to the next thing with like like Sabine and her her situation with meeting up with this sister in arms and like their issues and doing this 2-3 episodes arc. Boom, bang, done. uh you know Ezra, Ahsoka, and Kanan doing like like the the Jedi stuff. That can be the bulk, partly the bulk of the overall series, and dealing with like the Empire being the second bulk of the entire series. But like all this other stuff, don't need it. I know I'm hammering, like I'm beating a dead horse with it, but that's how I feel. It's kind of annoying. But they eventually reach like Malachor, and you meet Maul again. It's like pretty much like well, you hardly can tell with like how he looks. He doesn't show, because he doesn't have hair, so you don't see gray hair. He has horns, and I guess his people don't show facial hair, but it's just like using a cane and everything like that. But it's like you got robotic legs, so do you really need limping to hint like, oh, you're old kind of thing? But he's at this hidden place. Why is he there by himself? Because he's trying to get like the Sith holocron. But since the Sith, because this is like a base long since forgotten and abandoned, and that's why you see like these like ash corpses of this massive battle between Sith and Jedi. And there's these abandoned lightsabers on the ground. Some of them have cross guards, just like Kylo Ren, but instead of red, it's like green. And you can tell this is the very ancient times during the past of the like early, like the not rise, but like during the height of probably like in the like old Republic time frame, maybe, where like the height of the Jedi and Sith, and as their battles finally come to the head. But this is the point before the rule of two came into place for the Sith, where it's like, in order to get this Sith holocron, you need, or even get to it, you need master and apprentice. There's only two. It's the no more, no less. That is always the key to in certain like not passage. Yeah, like these like hieroglyphs. There's like always mentions that there's always two, no more, no less. So Maul is like obviously seducing, or I won't say seducing, but it's like kind of getting inside Ezra's head, convincing him like, oh, I'm one of you, I'm on your side kind of thing, and enticing him because he seems more supportive or trusting of Ezra more so than Kanan. And this is where the stupid thing comes into play. Like I mentioned in the previous video about season 1, how like Ezra is so dumb. It's like, I know he's learning, but he shouldn't be that dumb and trusting a complete stranger that you barely know. And he's getting Kanan's face like, why don't you trust me? And it's like, partly I agree. You should be able to trust your Padawan or child or whatever to be able to make mistakes and learn from it and not, get on their ass about it as part of growing up. But also Ezra should be more mindful of trusting complete strangers that you just met up. So they're right and wrong on both ends. And it's like the whole Maul thing is kind of like watching Sidious and Anakin play out once again, where Maul is feeding into Ezra's insecurities and ego. It's like, and then like when those female Inquisitor and dad bod Inquisitor and like this 8th brother, I think that's what he's called, tried to like ambush them, thanks to be fair, thanks to Maul, him, Ahsoka, and Kanan managed to kill and defeat these guys. So that's why I say there's no point in remembering these guys' names, because they don't last freaking long in this series. They're pretty much like, not canon fodder, but it's like, oh, they're the bad guy of the season that need to be killed off, or them to challenge the main heroes without losing the main people who are part of the movies. They reach the Sith holocron, but Vader shows up. Of course, Kanan's blinded thanks to like a fight he had with Kanan, but Kanan managed to still beat him. But he later escapes on one of the Inquisitor's ships, so he'll show up eventually in like the last season, definitely last season. But Vader takes on Ahsoka, and Ahsoka managed to, break a part of his mask, and you see like the eye of Anakin, and like, Anakin's voice come out, and she like, and then like he's trying to get like the Sith holocron from them because it holds like Sith information, but Kanan and Ezra managed to take it. And for all they know, Ahsoka died fighting Vader. But like I mentioned earlier, like they both end up escaping, but through different ways. And they all left scarred. And Kanan now blinded. Now you gotta work through that. And then Ezra's meditating and opening up the Sith holocron using the Force. And when trying to use anything Sith related, you gotta harness your anger and hatred in order to do certain things. So that's gonna be like a interesting tonal shift possibly in season 3. I vaguely remember season 3. I vaguely remember how this entire Rebel series plays out, except for certain key things that matters to the overall narrative. But yeah, that's season 2. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought overall for season 2 yourself. And yeah, I will see you guys next week to wrap up Rebels with 3 and 4. And eventually I'll go back to the movies and review Rogue One. And that will lead right into A New Hope, obviously. But anyway, I'll see you guys later. Take care.